Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, Peak Performance Coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley, bringing you amazing and inspiring guests, and you're going to be very happy with who we bring in today. I want to share some analytics. We just did a podcast 45 minutes ago, so the analytics are the same. We are currently being subscribed to and listened to on 6 continents, 40 countries, all 50 states, and 994 cities. I want to read a nice heart letter we got last week, I believe it was the day before Thanksgiving. And again, I'm having problems with my computer. There we go. Okay, this heart letter come from a person who said, I want to wish you happy Thanksgiving to you and your crew. I'm especially thankful for your mentorship, the podcast, and the guests you bring on to share their unique stories of success. And I have a great feeling you're going to really get a lot out of this guest, too, and her unique story and her success. I'm going to dedicate this episode to a friend of mine named Gary. And Gary, I'm going to episode because Gary is a hunter and a very respectful hunter of deer and all animals. He harvests deer with respect. He does take home every part of the deer he can, and he uses it with a respectful nature. Well, last night, Gary, at 80 years old, harvested an 8-point buck after about 60 hours of sitting in the woods this winter. And I just love his dedication. Whether or not people agree with hunting or fishing or not, the dedication this man puts into going into nature and the respect he shows for nature. I was very happy to get a text with a picture of him with a deer that he's going to be able to feed his family this winter. So this one goes out to you, Gary. All right, today I have a guest on here that we connected a couple of years ago on Facebook, and we have a mutual friend from Michigan, actually, which is odd. And I've followed her journey through Facebook, and I've just been so inspired and intrigued by the pictures that she shows and the stories of her and her children doing these grand adventures in all these unique places and whitewater rafting and, just some cool stuff. So I reached out to her 2 weeks ago. I said, hey, Jen, you don't really know me, but I have this podcast. Would you mind being a guest on there? And she's like, heck yeah. So we got a chance yesterday to talk for the first time. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be great. So we actually scheduled it the next day. So she hasn't had much time to prepare, but I don't think she needs a lot of preparation. We have Jen Kjellesvik, right?
Yes,
Kjellesvik.
that's it.
Okay, on here today. I'm sorry, man, but the name, it's a tough one for me to pronounce. I'll get it. Jen is a love of the river, actually in all things water. She's an adventurer, a traveler, a fully committed mother of 2 amazing children. She's a Norwegian warrior. She is an iconoclast. So I'm going to introduce the Unconquerable Jen. Welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm honored, truly.
Well, we had such a unique conversation yesterday. I'm like, man, this is going to be so much fun. So, it's just 2 people having a great conversation. And I know the story you shared and the wisdom you shared with me yesterday, the Bamboo Pack is going to eat this up. So,
awesome.
I know a little bit about you through Facebook and our conversation yesterday and a little bit of our conversation prior to the recording of today's episode. But can you share with me and the rest of the Bamboo Pack, who are you? Where'd you come from? What got you to where, what made this woman?
Yeah, well, we were speaking earlier about, iconoclastic person, duality, things like that. And I feel like I came from a really traditional upbringing, and I never fit in a lot of ways. I just had an internal guide and knowingness and desires that did not align with the way I was raised. And I just always followed my intuition, and it's just shaped who I am. I really feel like I've just had a boldness about myself since I was a kid, a knowingness of right and wrong and truth, and raised in Utah, right? Generational Mormon, love my family, really fun in the 80s, 90s. We did a lot of sports, 4th of 5 kids, really competitive, tomboy all the way. I had 2 older brothers. It was very physical growing up. I mean, I had 2 sisters as well. They're incredible. But I found myself in my brother's rooms looking at their knives and guns and all these different things and just running with the boys a lot of times. And this is, the classic 80s where like my brothers were jumping us with their dirt bikes, right? They'd lay down like a skateboard and then a rake and then put me on the very end, right? And I just remember the tires just skimming my face. And it was like I was constantly roughhousing, wrestling cousins. They would set us up in boxing matches. Things like when I cried to my mom, she'd be like, don't play with people bigger than you, right? But I want to. It was just a fun upbringing. The big thing that I really stood out different was the Mormon religion I was raised in. From a young age, I remember sitting there thinking, I had this belief in prayer and this knowingness and just thinking, why is this guy telling me how to have a relationship with God that I already have? I just didn't like the controlling structure of it. There was also a big patriarchy, and nothing against anybody who's Mormon, right? But for me to be a 5th, 6th generation, I mean, my family is still all in Utah for generations. We call it the Mormon pipeline. There's an order to things. And if you don't fit in that, you're on your own. So I've always blazed my own trails. I mean, when I was 18, I knew that I did not want what everybody else wanted. The girls my age all wanted to get married, have a house and a family immediately. And to me, that marriage looked like a trap. That big house they all wanted on the hill looked like a cage. I was just wired different. And I knew that from the get-go. So I set out and took off to Alaska. I just gotten my wilderness EMT, and I started river guiding up there as a teenager, and I just fell in love with it. Talked my way into a job. I was one of 3 women at 4 companies and just never stopped. So the river has pretty much shaped my entire life. Along the way, I never planned on having kids or family or anything like that. I knew I loved kids. I was great with kids, but I just was such a free spirit. I didn't think I would make a good mom. I don't know how a kid would fit into my lifestyle. I explored. I did a lot of crazy things. I mean, it was the 90s. Had a little bit of trauma from my last senior year in high school and going into the world being an adrenaline junkie, right? My favorite show at the time, my movie in my high school years was Point Break. Like literally my friends would be like, you're a female Bodhi. Like I just always thought for myself and had my own idea and intuition that I followed. And going into the world, I just wanted to travel. I studied aviation in college for a time, and I was headed back east from the Gauley River. I've been guiding about 5 years. I was headed from Colorado. And I was going to go after Gauley season to New Zealand. I had a job river guiding there. I was going to get my helicopter license and be a pro athlete. Mostly kayaking was what I was into. This was the 90s, right? Late 90s, and just traveled the world and found out I was pregnant from a guy I knew 3 months on the river, and it dramatically changed my life. So to put it short, in 2 years, in my early 20s, I was married twice and had a baby, none of it planned. Mm-hmm. So early on, I realized, I mean, we're not in control, right? There's things we have in our life. It's all about adapting. For me, that's why I've run rivers this entire time. I mean, I guided class 4 or 5 through pregnancies with my kids. It just is a huge part of my life. In fact, this morning I went and punched above my weight. I went and challenged for a permit on our local waterway that nobody challenges for. Because I have business plans, I have ideas, I've got, a lot of contributions to make in a really supportive community. So
I'm not going to ask you, but if you got it or not, but when will you know if you got it?
I think a couple months.
Okay.
I happen to be a really cool woman who sees what I offer and was like, man, let's see what we can do. Which she's some fresh blood in the mix, right? With the governing authorities, which I just think is awesome. The timing, it's shifting, right? The global energy, especially since COVID, I feel a huge shift. There's so much change happening, and I feel like we're all called to become our fullest selves, and people are seeing through a lot of the BS, and they're stepping into their own. For example, saying, being who we really are, like we spoke about earlier, Norwegian warrior. This is just such an interesting after speaking with you yesterday, I had this memory as a child. I was like 3 or 4. And I remember literally praying to go to war, praying. Like, that's all I wanted. It was my deepest desire. That's who I was. That's who I was inside. And in my mind, I pictured me going to battle with a sword, with a shield, with a tomahawk, like axe type thing. I was screaming. I was like joyful, loving it. And I remember not understanding where that came from. I didn't even know our Norwegian, Scandinavian, Germanic heritage at that point when I was that little. I didn't even really know about Vikings or battle or anything, but I kept it to myself. That I just knew my authentic self was I wanted to go to battle. That's who I was. And being a woman in this world, like I've never really seen, like I still juggle with that, where that fits in, having that mentality, but yet you're supposed to be the soft, nurturing mother, which I am. I found out I have really good instincts, and I definitely raise my kids, according to a knowingness that I feel like I was gifted. Like I just have this intuition that I didn't know was there. Mm-hmm. But, even having my son, like the entire time when I found out I was pregnant with him, right, I was headed to New Zealand. I thought my life was over. There was no doubt I was going to just take care of it, give him up or have an abortion. I mean, there was no doubt. I was just trying to figure out. And I mean, we don't have to get into the details unless you want to, but there were literally divine interventions from the second I left that great Planned Parenthood that helped me take the tests and between river trips. It was insane. I've had so many miracles happen through my life that I do have a strong relationship and a belief in God and prayer. But I explored, right? I broke out of this religion that I don't feel I think it's just human made. There's a lot of rules and things that aren't really aligned with what I think is truth. But to each their own, right? I explored Buddhism. I was married in a Buddhist temple in Kathmandu. I had a wild 90s before kids where I was literally river guiding class 4 or 5, ripped on acid and ecstasy, snowboarding on mushrooms. I mean, I did it all. I was crazy. Like there are so many times I should have died and I didn't. I've definitely explored a lot of different things, and I've just been a seeker. Like I feel like there's so much to see and do, and I've simmered a little bit of my ambitions and things to raise my kids. I'm their rock. I'm their number one. So I make sure they're first, and they're incredible humans. Almost done with my second one. She's a sophomore in high school, and I have a lot of plans. I'm going to go get that helicopter license for one, finish that one up.
Jen, can you tell a story, if you feel comfortable? You shared a story with me yesterday where you were in the hospital, your son was just born, and you were like, this motherhood's not for me. And then there was some intervention there divine intervention that you felt that just kind of transformed you. Can you share that? Would you feel comfortable sharing that? Yeah.
Well, to just go back a little bit, the way I found out I was pregnant with him was the first season on the Arkansas River, the Royal Gorge in Colorado, right? I was a boyfriend of mine who was a Golly guy took me out there. I had no training. I shouldn't even been in the gorge, right? I saw the river 3 times. Jumped on a commercial trip, worked for this small company. And it's like, you don't jump on that whitewater without having a year or 2 upstream in class 3 stuff, right? Mm-hmm. I was reckless. I was wild. I could care less if I lived or died, right? We're like at the bar the night before drawing 13 miles rapids on a cocktail napkin, It's like, of course I didn't remember it. First run down, I flipped 4 times, right? So flipping that much, I got this nickname. They called me Carnage Queen. And at first I was mad because I wanted to be good at it. But I basically learned on the job. So I swam a lot. There was one particular flip I remember in Boat Eater where I blacked out and almost drowned. And I found out right after that I was pregnant with my son the whole time. Funny thing was that whole summer, I remember craving red meat. And I had no idea why. If I didn't get a trip with my own company, I'd go to this one company first called Buff Joe's, right? There were all these Golly guides. And the reason I was there is because they served steak on their full day. So I'd show up and they'd bump some new guide off the trip to give me the full day because I was a hot chick, right? And there's not many chicks on the water. And so they always welcomed me. And literally I was just there to eat steak. And it's a joke that my son was created on adrenaline and red meat. I mean, that's literally how he started. But yeah, so end of the season, all these guides are sitting. This is where the first intervention happened. We were meeting in this park, Canyon City, Colorado. We're all going to caravan back east to the Gauley River in West Virginia on that season. And then I was headed to New Zealand, right? I guided about 5 years, was ready to take it to the next level. And my friend, Kizzy, amazing friend, kept saying, Jen, just go get a pregnancy test. I was like, I don't know how. No, I don't have time. So I did. I slipped over to Planned Parenthood. She gave 2 of them to me. I've never sat down with cold sweats in my life. That one time, I did not know what I was going to do. It was instantly, I was like, oh, I'm not. Now where do I get an abortion on the way? That was my first thought. Go back to the park. And the dad, who I had just broken up with, came out of the crowd of river guides, met me right there, walked up to me. The first thing he said is, you're pregnant with my son. And if you don't want him, I do. And I was like, what the? And trying to lie, right? I couldn't. I just started to cry. And he said, just please don't. He knew how I was wired, right? And he just said, please don't, just please. Like, he was former military. You know, we were pretty wild crew, all of us. And the next morning I stopped in Salida. I called my mom, who I hadn't talked to months on end. They never knew where I was. I was always on a different river, a different ski resort. I was on the road. First thing she says is, you're pregnant, aren't you? And I was like, what the hell? Started to cry. Come home, we'll figure this out. Shotgun wedding, right? 3 days after I found out I'm pregnant, I'm married to this guy, do the right thing. Miserable. It was domestic violence for 8 months of that pregnancy. I snowboarded. I hid my pregnancy through that whole time. At my lunch break at the ski resort I worked at, I just flipped through the pages. This is in 1998, right? And look for adoption agencies. I was miserable. And another intervention that happened was I was snowboarding and took a wipe out, caught a toe edge, fell straight on my stomach. I was probably about 8 months pregnant, right? Like, you couldn't even tell because I just hit it and I just charged hard. And I wasn't going to let some kid stop me, right, from being me. And that was the first time I really felt compassion toward this life that was growing in me. And I remember it hurt so bad. Like, I literally thought I killed my baby. I landed flat on my stomach, like the toe edge catch. If you've snowboarded before, it's like everything just goes right. I mean, it's quick, it's fast, it's a slam. But I hit on my stomach, and all this heat rushed around my entire belly like I've never felt before. And I really feel like it was a healing. I had no issues. I called my doctor. He was fine, right? Mm-hmm. Going into the hospital to have him, I got induced a day early. It was just out of convenience. I had a really good doctor my sister used. I walked in and told the dad, I don't want to be a mom. I don't. It's not that I don't love children. Like, I love kids. It's just I grew up with a really amazing mom, right? She was domestic. She was an artist. She was a feng shui interior decorator. She would taught piano to hundreds of students over 30, 40 years. I mean, I grew up in this idyllic setting, and I looked at that and I just knew I could not stay at home. And all these girls who got married at 18, 19, 20, that was not me. And so I just didn't know how I would do this. And when I went in, easy birth, everyone left. My family was there supporting me. I have an amazing family. They went home, and I was just sitting in this room by myself with my baby, who was hours old. And I remember looking over in the bassinet, just like in shock. I was in shock. I was a mom, and this was not my plans. And I remember he had these big green eyes, and he was just looking at the world. He was self-contained. And so, you know, I had a little bit of attitude, like, oh, he's going to cry. He's an infant. He's going to need me. And I just, you know, he didn't. He was just complete. He was just this solid little, and he's this way to this day. Like, he's unlike any human I've ever met. So I picked him up, was looking in at him, and he was just looking at me. And all of a sudden, and at this point, I didn't really know God. I wasn't a Christian at this point, but God showed me his soul. And he was regal. He was royal. He was an amazing spirit. Like not just average. Like this child was exceptional. This child was here with a mission. And for some reason, I was his mom. And I remember I became intimidated. Like, I didn't want him. I wasn't worthy. I'd been wild and crazy. Like, I felt like I don't know why I'm his mom. And literally his voice, it was like telepathically just spoke these simple words and just said, you can do it, Mom. And he called me Mom. And I was like, what? Then this feeling came over me so powerful. It was almost like God put this instinct instantly in me, this mother instinct that it was like instant. Like, I would kill for this child. He's my baby. I will raise him. I know exactly how to raise him. I'm in love with this baby instantly. And it just took over. And those instincts have never left since. And it's just gotten stronger and better. And literally my children are a calling. I feel like I am called to be mother, and it was never in my plan.
Well, obviously his spirit speaking to you telepathically was right. And when we had our conversation yesterday on the phone, and of course following on Facebook and just hearing your passion for your children, yeah, you definitely can do it, Mom. You're doing it and you've done it. So he's dead on. So your son, I'm going to shout out to him because he was a very wise infant. And I'm sure he's a very wise 20-some-year-old now.
Yeah, he is. And that's the thing, you realize it's so humbling as a mom. Like, your kids have a path of their own. They are here to do great things. And to me, it is a really humbling honor that I get to raise them and be able to help them find their gifts. And I get to watch this journey along the way and see who these humans grow up to be. And like, every day I am humbled by it. And every day I'm just in awe of it. And it's the most important part of my life, is being their mom. And our daughter is just equally incredible. The minute she was born, she was an emergency C-section. They pulled her out. And the minute I saw her, I turned to my husband. I said, I know her from somewhere. I know her. And I have this bond. Speaking of that warrior Norwegian, my son is born. It sounds crazy, but that boy is born to fight battles. Like, that's what he does. He's a warrior. I mean, he had to make it through me first. In his early years, he had to fight. We had to fight his biological father, who was an OG of Blackwater. It's a crazy story. And it was the power of prayer of friends. When he was 9 years old, they prayed 40 days, 40 nights, and were able to free him from the abuse and everything we had been struggling to protect him for in court. I mean, this child, 5 years old, right? He hadn't seen him for a year and a half, the biological father. This is just to give you an idea of who he is. Mm-hmm. He had over a weekend visit, right? And got him home from kindergarten. I mean, I am torn up inside more than I've ever been, on my knees, begging God, please just let me fight this battle. I can do it. Not my child, not my child. Because when he took him, he would cut off contact. He would shave his head. You never knew what was going to happen. But as a mom, I was connected to my baby from that minute he was an infant. And I could literally feel when he was getting hurt. I could feel it no matter how far he was from me. And sending your baby to the wolves like that is a hell I can't even describe, when they threatened to take him from me legally if I didn't send him, right? And so I empowered him. And so I learned really quick to play the game. And I realized my son's a warrior, and what my job is I'm going to weaponize his mind. And I'm going to teach him how to stand up for himself. I'm going to pull out the gifts in him as much as I can. I'm going to be strong for him. So, for example, when he was a toddler, right, he would naturally act out the things when he'd come home from these visits with the father, right? The father would do things like try to drown-proof him as an infant, hold him underwater, put river water in his sippy cup. He would show him live killings. He would, and I'm not saying all special ops guys are this way by any means, but this guy was wired wrong, right?
Right.
And my son was at his mercy, and we were fighting and fighting and fighting. We did everything right. They didn't protect him. They didn't even give him supervised visits, right? So he hadn't seen his father, and he had the guts to speak up when he was 3 and 4 years old. And the court did this sudden visit, and he was 5. He hadn't seen me a year and a half. He knew he was going to pay, right, to go with this guy. He goes to his room, right? This visit just sprung upon my little 5-year-old. Goes to his room, and I said, let's get something for you. I'm juggling with the cops, the whole scenario. I'm in shock, just hanging in there myself, trying to be strong for my baby. He comes out, and I'm thinking he's going to have a blanket or something to take with him on this scary overnight visit. He comes out in full armor. He's got his helmet on. He had this little knight toy armor, helmet, breastplate, shield, 2 swords. And he put his head down, and he just walked to the car. Never cried, never complained. He just went to face the battle. 5 years old. And talk about falling apart inside as a mom. And so I'm constantly battling being strong for him, and at the same time just devastated and destroyed what my child is going through. But I realized this is his path, and he needs a mom who's going to be strong, and she's got to be a warrior too. Another example, I weaponized my son's mind was holding him accountable. So when he was 3, 4, he would act out. Sometimes he would lash out at kids impulsively. One time he stomped his pet fish, and he loved animals. I know my son's heart, right? Mm-hmm. This wasn't him. This is the behavior. And I come from a long line of psychologists in my family. My older sister is a brilliant one, and she helped me quite a bit understand tactics and ways that I could work with him and heal him. And I had him in therapy, right, as we're battling this to protect him in court. But what I would do is I would get down and I'd look him in the face, 3 or 4 years old, even though my heart was breaking to see his pain. I just wanted to hold him. That's all I wanted to do, was hold my baby. But I would get down and look in his face, and I'd say, no, you're hurting. I see you. And we're fighting this, and we're going to win. We're not going to stop. But you cannot hurt other people. And I would give him a timeout, and I would hold him accountable, because I would never let whatever happened to him define him. I don't have a victim mentality. He definitely doesn't. And so to bring a son up in society who's gone through trauma, on top of that, he's a very physical, masculine. He's probably the most masculine male I've ever seen, literally. And I grew up with really rugged brothers, right? He has a calling on him, and he overcame all of this. So watching this child fight these battles and go through this, and then till the point where he was able to testify in court when he was 9 years old and we were free of the biological dad, and watch him take off. I mean, the journey has just been profound for me and all consuming, because I was the rock. I was the one. And to this day, he'll tell me, Mom, you're the perfect mom for me. You're just, and my mom encouraged that. She would always tell me, Jen, he's yours. He was sent to you for a reason. You got this. And I knew that. I looked at him and I saw the warrior side in him. Everything is, and it's not malicious. It's fighting as warriors. And we talked about preserving manhood, right? In elementary school, you had a duty recess teachers tell him he couldn't run full speed because he scared kids, or he wasn't allowed to do all these things. So it was this society where I'm trying to have my son be in self-control and behave and also unleash and protect who he really is he's a warrior. That's the only way to explain him. And contact sports is what we got him into. My husband was a rugby player, so he understands the physicality of a lot of women too. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I was beating up boys. I was in fights. I was suspended for fighting all the time. I was just really physical. And that's why I can relate with my son. Like I wanted, my son sees that in me too. He said, Mom, I'm surprised you're not in MMA or you're not in the military or something. I said, I know. It's just the river is where I found my place. But to watch a child triumph over something that should have destroyed him in a lot of ways it's just a profound experience, to put it lightly. And then to see him exceed. I mean, 4 sports in high school, top of level of all of them, played rugby in New Zealand for a year, played rugby in college. Now he's in the U.S. Navy, really pursuing his calling. All I can say is he's in special forces, and that's all I can say. But he's living it. And one thing I instilled in my kids is you have a calling in your heart, and that is meant to be fulfilled. That's your purpose here. And you wouldn't even have that desire if God didn't make you fully capable of achieving it. So go get it. Like, I'm a huge dreamer myself, and I've always followed my own path and blazed my own trails. And I feel like that's one of the reasons I am the mother of the kids I have. I just really enjoy seeing their gifts and getting to be the first one to nurture those. Like, I can't even explain the joy it brings me, honestly. It's fun. I love my kids.
I have to tell you, I after talking to you yesterday and now hearing you now again, I really want to meet your son someday. I mean, he sounds like just his story. He sounds like a gentle warrior, like a person who's got a wise warrior. I mean, I'm just picturing, and of course I've seen Facebook pictures of him on Facebook, and he looks like he should be sitting on the cover of GQ magazine. And I'm like, but also hear this other side to him. That's the third dimension. And that's why when people don't have these conversations, you don't see that. Facebook is just 2-dimensional. When you get behind the story and pull back the curtain, you really realize these amazing people that are out there, like your son and your daughter as well, and you. So I got a question for you. So let's go with this way. You're this 4-year-old girl who was dreaming about going out to battle with a sword, hoping for a war to fight battle. You're the Norwegian warrior, Unconquerable. I know you shared some difficult things you've gone through. Would you say that was the most difficult moment of your life, or your point in your life, when your son, you were dealing with your ex-husband, and he was, in a lot of ways torturing your son? I mean, I can't describe another word for it. That's the best way to describe it. Or was there another time that we'd call more difficult?
No, and I would say for me, that's where I really found Christianity, because I had nothing left. Like, the court system wouldn't work. His therapist testified they didn't believe her. The father had a lot more money than we did, and he would threaten, I have security clearance above the president, and throw this black ops in our face, and just was an untouchable, arrogant. I mean, the final blow was our attorney we got for the final stage actually had a client that was suing the father for another reason. And it was just ironic that we happened to get the same attorney. I mean, this guy was scary. This guy scared people. I mean, I had 6-7 restraining orders on him and it wasn't, that's what was strange, is that I was not afraid of him at all. I had this rage in me. I wanted to kill him. You do not hurt my kids. You don't. And so the guy could have, he's trained in warfare, weapons. That's what he does for a living. He's basically a mercenary. But I did not care. When you step to me and you hurt my child, you're done. And so a lot of the restraining orders I got because it was a paper trail, right? So I'm playing the game legally to try to protect my son. And then going out the door, when my son would go out, it was prayer. And the depression would set in. I never knew if he was going to bring him back. I didn't know how injured or messed up he would be. There was always a regression in his trying to deal with things when he come back. We worked through a lot of it in art and nature and therapy, but going out that door, I'll never forget, my son would grab my hand and look up at me, and he would tell me, I'm going to be okay, Mom. I'm going to be okay. Like, he was trying to comfort me, and we both knew he wasn't. We knew there was going to be something. He had him driving on the freeway as a biological father. He's 6 years old. He came home with this knife strapped to his leg. He had him shooting machine guns when he was 1. There are pictures of it. They would not protect him. And it took a miracle from our friends who prayed 40 days and 40 nights. And our son went in at 9 years old and knew things and said things that no 9-year-old would know. And when we were done with that court battle, the biological father was just sobbing in the courtroom, just crying. And when we were done with that battle, he came out and we were rallying around. My family happened to be in the hometown of my parents and some of my siblings. We went back. It was really great to have their support. And he walked in and he just looked at us and he said, I handled it. And he looked at me, he said, Mom, you won't follow us anymore. And he never looked back. And it was like, I'm the one traumatized. But yes, I've overcome, rape as a young woman. I've overcome, there were a suicide attempt, there was depression, there was abuse. I've had domestic violence. I've had things happen. And I would say the hardest thing ever would be, for sure, when your child is fighting the heaviest battle that you don't even, And then on that note, my beautiful daughter lost her best friend to suicide when she was only 11. And it wasn't just a friend, it was her soulmate, a little boy 3 days older than her, that they met as babies, totally unforeseen, fantastic family. To this day, we don't have answers. But to walk your child through that, she couldn't say his name for years. It was she's 15 now, but literally I remember at one point she said, she was able to speak it. And she said, when he died, I feel like my future was taken from me, and to have that profound, that heaviness at such a young age of loss. How do you do that as a mom? How do you carry your child through that unforeseen? And she's just a remarkable person too. She is such an addition. She's a healer, her childhood, literally my son watching her go through a perfect childhood, what his should have, could have been, what we all hope for, right? Healed him. And he knew about her before she was born. He would tell us about her in kindergarten. He'd tell his teachers, he got pictures of his blonde, curly haired little sister and tell us about her. But these children, for me, the most profound part of my life and the most difficult, I would say for sure, is when you can't protect your child. And then you get real and you go inward and you pray to God and you start using everything you can you harden up really quick. You play the game. I learned the court system game. I documented. I mean, you pull out another level of battle warfare that you didn't even know was there because you have to and you won't quit. And yeah, to just have it's all to be used though, right? This is what I teach my kids, right? We use those later. And you are right. My son is very compassionate. He is the most compassionate person. He doesn't take any crap. He's a straight shooter. He's definitely the alpha personality, but he's very fair. He's honest. And he has a huge heart. Like one lacrosse tournament in San Francisco, right? He was a sophomore in high school. The coach came and found me and said, your son went over to this old guy. The lacrosse team was in the lobby getting ready for a tournament. And he noticed this old man sitting in the lobby at the breakfast table by himself. And my son went over and sat down with him, introduced himself, chatted with this old guy, and just made sure his day was better. And I mean, and I would see him, we would drive around town and there'd be homeless people and I would see him pray. He has a strong belief in prayer as well. I'd see him stop and pray for them. Or I'd see him go help somebody. Like he notices people in pain. And I think a lot of that is because he felt pain as a young child. He knows what that's like. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I think he's a perfect epitome of the statement that, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And so, I mean, I think that when you were talking about him, that's the first thing I thought of. So, I mean, I got to ask you a question. So you've gone through, the list is, rape, suicide attempt, depression, the battle with your ex-husband and your son, and just that, I know it, that primal parental fear that we have when our children are not, we know there could be in danger. Your daughter, domestic violence you went through. You're walking your daughter through the suicide of her best friend when she was 11 years old. I mean, how is life for you right now? How would you describe, how is life for you right now?
Oh my gosh, Brian, we are so freaking blessed. You don't even know. Like, I feel like, for one, we have deep reserves of adaptability. We just do. And my kids do. And it's like, they're under no illusion that life is not fair. I mean, we know that. We know we make our own mark. We get to decide how we're going to take all these hits. And we expect it. We expect that one battle, we conquer one, then there's the next one. And to us, yeah, we feel the pain. Yeah, we can get depressed. Yeah, we can really feel a lot of sorrow and hurt, but we don't stay there. And for us, it motivates us. Like literally, and I say us because my kids are wired the same way and they're even better at it than I am. They're stepping stones, right? It's like, all right, we come away more confident. All right, I overcame that. What's next? Let's go. That's how we think. That's just how we're hardwired. Like we don't feel like we're owed anything. We don't feel like victims at all. We feel like warriors. Like we feel like, yeah, we're expected to fight battles and everybody will get them. Everyone's going to get some battles of some kind. And it's not, even though you look at this and it's like, yeah, physically we may exemplify that. We're really physical. We're good athletes. We're fit. It's what we do. Our outlets are all physical. Warrior doesn't mean like you have to look like this badass stud, strong woman, whatever. It's a mindset. I see like my friend's son who's been disabled from birth. That kid is a freaking warrior, right? I see I have a nephew, right? He really struggles with some mental health issues. I mean, that kid fights every day to just stay alive sometimes. He is a warrior, but nobody sees it, right? Because if you look at that outside in, the kid struggles to keep a job. There's a lot of depression. There's some substance addictions. I mean, there's these things, but you know what? You don't know what he's going through every day to just wake up. That kid is a fighter, right? I have friends right now, women who are holding the entire weight of their families. They have alcoholic husbands, right? And 4 kids they're raising and trying to create their own businesses. And everything is on their shoulders. It's like, girl, can I just bear the load for you, with you? What can I do? She's a warrior. She's a warrior. It's everywhere you look. The little kid, that's walking into elementary school and you don't know what his home life is like. And he's just showing up to school because that's his only safe place. And that's one thing I have a real huge heart for is kids. Like, I feel like some adults, especially ones that don't have kids or not around kids, some of them, they overlook how profound and intelligent and gifted and how much these youth carry for their age, which is my theory on suicide. I mean, I attempted suicide when I was 18, my senior year. I had been through a year of basically 8 months of getting raped by my brother's friend, right? It was, again, it was hidden and masked under the religion I was raised in, right? I was 17. He was 23. He was this returned missionary, right? So I let down my guard. During that time, my mom, it was just my sister, my younger sister, and I left in the house. 3 older siblings were gone and grown. But my mom had flipped out at that point, and I don't know what happened. I mean, the woman would run circles around anyone today. She is an incredible, intelligent, classy, sophisticated, educated, artistic, warm, loving mother. But something clicked when I was 16, 17, and she flipped on me. And just so you know, I mean, we lost her 4 years ago, but her and I worked through it over the years and absolutely forgiven her and worked through it. And I just think maybe she was pushed too far. I don't know. But at that time, as a teenager, it derailed me for quite some time, which is why I'm very hands-on with my own kids, because I can see you can raise a kid all the way to their senior year of high school and something can happen to them and it can send them off the rails for years to recover. So it basically started with her, this verbal, emotional and spiritual abuse, where she would come in my room in the night and say, you know, who do you have in here? I was the most innocent girl, right? What kind of drugs are you on? It's like, are you kidding? I would never do drugs, right? Or, you know, she would say, I could see like the darkness in your eyes, the devil in your eyes. I was like, what the hell is happening, right? I'm like, straight A student, you know, always on the honor roll, captain of my teams. I had a leadership scholarship. I was going places. I was motivated, driven, ambitious. And the senior year just took me off the rails when she started talking to me that way. Well, of course, there's some creep guy waiting in the wings, happened to be the guy that was around my brother at that time, who was there to scoop me up, right? When my home wasn't safe, take me away from there at any hour. Before I knew it, he was raping me. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought it was my fault. And that developed into an eating disorder. And it wasn't because of anything about image, like I thought I was fat or anything like that. It was the weight of what I was carrying, these secrets, was so heavy that I couldn't eat. And so I starved for days at a time, because eating food, anytime I ate, it would make all the pain and the grief and the sorrow I was holding come back. And so then that turned to bulimia, right? Because then I would eat and I would feel all the fear and the terror and the sadness, and I would throw up, and I'd never felt sadness. I'm happy by nature. So that led to depression. So I was getting, you know, emotionally abused when I was around my mom that senior year in the day, verbally, and then raped at night through my senior year, right? And literally my grades dropped. I mean, I'd never experienced depression like that in my life. And toward the end, I remember I had 2 guy friends. They're the ones who basically saved me from this guy. I didn't tell anyone. I had the guts to go to the bishop, right? This is what you do in the Mormon religion. You tell the bishop. And I remember going in there going, what does this guy know? He's just some guy. But I tried to follow the protocol, and the guy told me to repent. Didn't believe me, right? And the returned missionary was up in church giving talks. You know, I knew I wasn't believed. And I was like, yeah, definitely over this religion. These guys, it's wrong. Like I saw so much wrong of it when I was little, but I did have a relationship with God through prayer. Anyway, the end of my senior year, my 2 good buddies, Steve and Justin. Steve, I grew up with as a child, right? And we knew each other. We were the ones pulling the fire alarm in elementary school, you know, getting in trouble, you know, getting suspended for fighting or roughhousing. We just had a blast together. Steve and I were best friends. And he knew me. So him and Justin pulled me aside and said, what's wrong? What is happening to you? And I kind of told them, and they picked up instantly. And they said, Jen, this guy's raping you. You don't know that. And I just couldn't even admit that. I'm a strong woman. I didn't even see that happening. I don't think of myself as a victim. They were instantly mad. They wanted to go find this guy, beat him up. I wouldn't tell them. I just wanted it to all go away. I just wanted everyone to forget and just be free of him. They made me go break up with him. They said, you're going to go break up with him tonight, and then you're never going to see him again. You're going to come hang with us. So I did. I broke up with him, and the guy, of course, was psychotic and telling me I could never be with any man but him, and just crazy stuff I'd never experienced. So I had no one to tell these things to except for those 2 friends. And I graduated, and I was working on this, you know, leadership scholarship to this college all my friends went to. I made it on the cheer team as a song leader. And I became so depressed my senior year. At the very end, I remember just wanting to die. And I'd never felt depression like that before. And see, that's my whole point is kids today, I feel like for me, I didn't have enough life experience to know that what depression was and that it would pass and that there are resources and tools. And it's talked about more today, more openly, which I'm so grateful for. But this was 93, right? Mm-hmm. and nobody talked about it, and I didn't know what it was. And so all I knew was I was in so much pain. I just wanted to die to end the pain. It's not that I didn't want to live. I just didn't know any other way out of it. And I didn't know what my future looked like because, again, I didn't want to get married in their Mormon pipeline, right? I didn't want the house. I didn't want to do the domestic thing. And I knew I was on my own. So I had to blaze my trail from there and figure out who I was and what I wanted, because I did not fit in their format. I never did. So I was looking at my future, and it was very bleak. And I'm holding all this pain, and I just OD'd on sleeping pills and instantly regretted it after I did. Tried to throw them up, and I couldn't. So I'm sitting on my bed in my room waiting to just die. And my little sister walks by, does a double take, comes back, and was like, "What is wrong with you?" I told her, "Please don't tell anyone that I just did this. I don't know what to do." So she calls poison control. "Hey, my sister took all these pills. What can I?" And they sent an ambulance. And I'll never forget, the ambulance came to our door. My older brother happened to be visiting, and they came to the door and said, "We're here for the suicide temp." And he was like, "You're at the wrong house." And my sister brought me upstairs. They took me to the hospital, pumped my stomach, put me in inpatient care for a couple of weeks. And the therapist there, my mom claimed it was an eating disorder, but really he saw through it. He saw the abuse that I'd been suffering, because one thing my mom would say to me on repeat was, "One of us has to die." She would say that to me. And subliminally, now I know that planted the seed. You need to die because this woman hates you. Your own mother hates you for whatever reason. Right. And that trauma is what I went into the world with as a river guide. Right. So I'm an adrenaline junkie, and I'm carrying this pain of rape and emotional trauma, and I don't know what to do with it. I mean, Brian, there were probably 2-3 years in a row that I was high. I was baked. I smoked pot every day, every day. And then on top of that, the drugs were just like, I could care less if I lived or died. I could care less. So when my son came into my life and I became pregnant with him at 23, I was the hardest heart I'd ever been. Like, I literally was reckless. I mean, Carnage Queen is a fitting name for me, because I literally, you got on my boat. I didn't care. I didn't care if you died. I didn't care if I did. That's how hardened I was. And it started, my son, when I had that moment with him and he was hours old in the hospital after I gave birth to him, that's when God literally opened. It was almost like he melted the ice off my heart, and I was starting to feel love again. And so working through my own trauma and pain and abuse, I feel like helped me work with my son through his. I know what that feels like to be helpless against a parent. I know that feeling. I'm just really grateful he's not a type of person to self-inflict pain. He, if anything, would lash outwardly. He's just not wired that way. He's not a kind of dude that would ever take his life. That's just not how he thinks.
Right.
So, but yes, I am very aware of that. And ironically, you talk about, duality and not fitting in the mix, right? There's a lot of parents whose kids have been through some battles and fights, and, I have a relative whose son almost drowned, and they're really protective of him, right? That's not me. My kids were on the top of the playground, on top of the swings. I'm like, go fast, take chances, let's go. Like, you learn by doing. And I'm
Did we lose you, Jen? Jen, we might have lost you for a minute.
Okay, shoot. No
it just went silent for a minute, but we're back now.
Okay, good.
I'm going to ask you a question. I know you have this. It is. When I first reached out to you, I called you iconoclastic, and that is a very fitting term. But I also see the term unconquerable, and that's why when I gave the introduction, that just kind of came to me that and I hadn't even heard your full story. I'd only heard a fraction of it yesterday. If you could go back right now, and I want to capture some of the things you said here, because there's so much lesson in this. I mean, I've just been writing and listening. I haven't said 3 words, and you are a good talker, so I know you're a good freelancer. But if you could go back and talk to that 17-year-old girl who was being raped by that monster, what would you say to her? If you and I we could get a time machine right now, you go back, I'm going to sit back and just let you talk. What would you say to her?
I would tell her to trust her instincts. I would tell her to lean into that even more. Again, I feel like a big contributor to not recognizing that abuse was, one, I was spanked a lot as a kid. And I felt like my dad would lose his temper quite a bit. And again, we've worked through that. My dad's an amazing father. Good. But what that message was to me is my body's not my own. And a man can yank me in another room and spank me all he wants and take his temper out on me. I'm very anti-spanking. It doesn't work. I would say you trust your instincts. So I was confused. I was confused a little bit about what was really happening. I don't know if I'd say anything like, you can get through this, things are going to be okay, because I feel like I've always known that. Even though I didn't expect the pain that was to follow from the deep depression. I didn't know what depression was until then. I would just speak something warrior to her. I would tell her to freaking kick this guy's butt and get out of there. You know, like this is actually happening. Like, wake up. But you don't know, you know, when you have nowhere safe to go. It's so important that we give our kids a voice. And that is one thing I feel like I really worked hard at. And my kid's dad is really great at this too, is we feel our kids can tell us anything. And one thing I tell my kids from day one is, you are more important than any choice you will ever make. I don't care if you rob a bank, if you murder somebody, I don't care what you do. Let's talk about it. Let's come and rally. And that's what I didn't have at that time, was I couldn't tell my parents anything because I felt like I would be in trouble. So I suffered a lot because of that. And that's another reason why I don't agree with getting married so young and just that Mormon pipeline. I think you lack life experience. Yes, you can go to college. Yes, you can have a great career. Yes, you can have all these good family values. But I feel like there is a golden window in your 20s when you are supposed to go out and see the world, test the limits, travel, do all these things, go to college, play sports overseas, but go test your limits and figure out who you are by yourself. It's not the same if you have a spouse with you, but there is a golden window of life experience that can only be achieved by going out and pushing the limits. And I feel like that made me a much better mom. All the stuff I've been through, I was wiser to it. I mean, my family jokes that I really know how to raise a daughter because I know I've been through a lot of things women go through. And then I've also, you know, I've tested the limits myself. So I would just say, you know, I'm definitely proud of myself for following, you know, some people call it my truth, things like that, but following my intuition of who I knew I was. And even to this day, like I remember on the river guiding, right? They found out I was a mom, like I'd be at a new rafting company. So they tried to give me all the kids on the class 3 run, which I hated. I went there to get away from the kids. I wanted to get radical. I was like, give me the rowdy crew so I can flip boats and feel like myself again, right? So for me, my haven was found on the water. One of the very best trips I had on the Royal Gorge in Colorado was right after I had a emergency C-section for my daughter. I wasn't even supposed to be jogging or working out. I mean, literally weeks before. My husband had this annual rugby crew that would come and raft with us high water in May in Colorado on the Arkansas, the Royal Gorge section. Yeah. And I remember he was dividing everybody up to boats and he looked across at me and gave me a glance like, you want to take a trip? I mean, I know you're not supposed to because you got stitches. I looked at him one look and he understood exactly who I am, how I'm wired. And he sent over 6 of the fittest guys, these rugby teammates I've ever had. And he said, she's still got stitches, but do everything she says, right? So they jump in my boat, and it was the sickest run. It was like a sports car down the gorge. Like, I'd never dialed a better line. I mean, I had to stop calling forward 2s and just call forward 1 because they were so strong, so fit, so in sync as teammates. The best time, but that's what I needed. Like, that is where my happy spot is. After I had my son, right, and he was a new baby, I wanted to go back to the river after that first year. I wanted to go back to Colorado. And my family was thinking, oh, we got this wild child back in Utah. I spent 8 months to have him there. And they were trying to set me up with a husband. And I was just like, hell no, I'm out. I've got to go. I'm taking my baby with me. Went to Colorado, and that's when I happened to meet my husband of 20-something years, right? My son was 1 year old, still breastfeeding. And they were like, there's this crazy chick out here with a baby. And it was who I was, right? We camped out, and his biological dad at the time, we all got along that first year. So it was just a bunch of river guides and this little crazy kid running around camping. And again, I mean, I had some lady at the campground host. She wanted to call Child Protective Services on me because I didn't have a proper home for my son, right? But he was happier than he could ever be. I mean, we had pet dogs. He was, we went to daycare. My friend, we had a whole other family on the river. It was the same as if I worked a normal day job. I didn't do overnights, but it was who I was. That's where I find my balance, is the river. So that's why it's my profession. That's why I continue to share, raise my kids on the water. It's definitely their place too. But yeah, I mean, a year later, my husband, the guy I met, right, which is my longtime husband, he proposed to me on that river section. We got married a few months after that in Nepal, running rivers there in the oldest temple in Kathmandu, which was a profound experience. The guy that married us was a lama. And to go in there and have him marry us we got married in our chacos, the footwear we met in. And he had just gotten off around the world rugby tour for a year, and he saw me. And it's funny because I didn't believe in this, but right, I have this 1-year-old kid. I'm just fighting to be a good mom and continue my journey on these rivers and go overseas. And I walked in the room and he turned, and my friends to this day will remind me of this. He looked at me one time and looked at his friend and said, I'm going to marry her. I'm going to marry that girl. And he knew instantly. And it was just so quick and sudden, which is why I said I was married twice and had a baby all in 2 years. None of it planned, right? So, I mean, that's one thing that the river teaches too. I mean, if you're a person that has to be in control, you're not going to do well. You have to me, when the river gets out of control, there's an element of risk and danger. That's what makes it fun for me. Like, I love adventure. Like, I crave it. I need it. That's what I want.
I think, Jen, if I think there's members of the Bamboo Pack, and I'm sure you've met people like this all of your life. And I think my Bamboo Pack members, if they're listening, it's going to be a small minority. They're going to say, this lady is a weirdo. and she's raising a bunch of weirdos, and she hangs around with a bunch of weirdos, and they have babies on the river, and they get married. And I mean, here's my thoughts. If anybody out there has this thought, if you think Jen is a weirdo, or her friends and family, I would suggest this: make your life a safe haven for weirdos, because they change the friggin' world. And right. I think I just love the term. I think iconoclast is really just a better word for weirdo, but I think weirdos are the greatest people in the world, because call it what it is. As I peek behind the curtains of a lot of people's lives in my coaching practice, everybody's a weirdo. Some people are just a lot more honest about being a weirdo. And I think we have to make our life, our world, a much safer. Our lives. I want weird people in my world, because they change the world. They challenge the thinking. They challenge the status quo. They make you look at life from a completely different perspective. And there's no better value a person can bring to you in this world, other than maybe love. The second best value it can give you is changing your perspective and giving you a new paradigm. So because I'm listening to this going, man, this is a movie to be made. I mean,
weird. I mean, what is that term even, right? It's just lack of understanding, right? Well, if you sit down with somebody and see how they're hardwired, right?
Right.
It's when we all have a purpose, everyone serves a mission. I believe this earth is constantly going to have waves. It's not meant to be peaceful all the time. I mean, the story of the Bible, everything, right? There was this war. This whole earth was created by war. It's supposed to end in war. I mean, we're constantly fighting battles. And it's like, thank God for the warriors, because they are necessary. I mean, from the beginning of time. And that's where I resonate so deeply with our Norwegian culture. Circling back to that, the last 2 years, we lost everything in COVID. My son went back to college, and my daughter and I went to Hawaii, where I have a connection with the paddle community there. And I did cultural Polynesian tours where I taught voyaging, Polynesian history over this marine sanctuary. Again, I find myself on boats, right? Mm-hmm. And it was profound experience. And then during COVID, I would just take my daughter to work. So she would go and surf the surf break, which is break wall right there, while I go to these commute tours. And we just found this amazing guy, this Brazilian guy, right? Whose name's Fabio. He came over from Brazil in his 20s, never left. And he was absolutely following his passion, which is teaching surfing. He has a capoeira studio. He used to have an MMA studio. He does drumming. He used to do fire knife spinning, right? He does these Polynesian cultural tours. I mean, he created this out of nothing. And living in Hawaii, that's why we like to go back and forth between Bend and Hawaii, is my friends in Hawaii literally live out your passion and their calling. They live it better than anyone I've seen. Like every single one of them is living their dream job. They've created it. Ula, he's another friend of mine who I guided canoes with over there the last few years. He's a tribal elder. He's a musician. He served in the military. He runs an indigenous garden up country, Oluwalu, right around the west side. He lives what he wants to do. He's on the water teaching his culture, and then he plays music at night, and then he pours into the earth, and he taught me so much. The other owner of our surf school, this guy, Tim, he is a Hindu monk. And he had traveled the world for 7 years filming about his guru and making movies. That he's one of the last standing surf schools there that he started in the 90s out of a van. That is very successful. And he's there spiritually based. And that is what is so refreshing, to get off the mainland and live in the islands, actually live there, not go as a visitor and a tourist, right? But we worked there. My kids went to school there. We played sports there. We went to amazing churches there. We were adopted into that culture. And to be around people who are so authentic and that warm aloha and teaching and learning that Polynesian culture, it brought me full circle to my Viking Scandinavian culture, because they're very similar. It's a warrior, voyaging, exploring culture. You go out, you see, you conquer, you do, you get after this fearless, right? And it just brought me closer to what our genetic memory is, our identities, why I feel like I want to go to battle when I'm like a 4-year-old little girl in the US, in the 80s, like, who is this chick? And my son sees that, and my son is that. One of my favorite sayings where I raise my kids with is by Helen Keller. And it says, avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. The fearful are caught as often as the bold. And I've taught my kids, take risks, go for it. One of the best compliments my son gave me, we were driving back from a wrestling or rugby tournament, I can't remember, over the pass from Portland. And he said, Mom, thank you for never putting any limits on me. I don't even think with limits. Like, thank you. So many parents are out there being like, my kid doesn't know what they're doing. I never interfere with my kids. My daughter taught herself to swim as a toddler. And I remember people kept pulling her out of the pool, and she stomped her foot. She was 3 years old, right? And made a big announcement, stop pulling me out. I can swim. So I didn't tell her any different. I just watched her, hung by. She taught herself. She taught herself gymnastics and tumbling. She broke a couple of hard casts doing it, right? Because she couldn't stop tumbling. And there was one point where my husband said, she's going to break another cast. And I stopped him and I said, it is worth every trip to the ER. I'll take her again. See what she's learning. And so she evolved to back tucks. Right. And when I said, how did you teach yourself to do that? She was 8 years old. She could do anything. She said, my body just tells me to go. So I go. I mean, that's just a little kid.
Jen, you just have to tell your son and your daughter that in the future, I'm going to be reaching out to them to be guests on the podcast. I don't know when they're ready, but I think their story would be so interesting as well. I mean, and going back to your question, what is weird, right? I mean, weird is anything that's different than what I think. And that's the problem with our society is we think we all live in a square box, or not all of us, but many people do. They go to work, they get up, they have their breakfast, they go to work, they come home, they have a beer, they watch TV, they go to bed, it's just repetitive. They don't really live in every 10 years. They're not living 10 years. They don't have 10 years experience. They have 1 year of experience. They just repeated it 10 times. And I think what you've done and what you're doing with your children, what I see is every year you're getting 10 years of experience in every year versus, getting 1 year of experience every 10 years. And that's the difference. And that's why I say make your life and world a safe haven for weirdos, man. Bring them in because they're going to change your life. They're going to change your perspective.
Bring me the rowdy kids.
Yeah.
Bring me the wild ones. They're my favorite.
Yeah. Don't give me the kid that sits up straight in the front of the class. Give me the one that's in the back of the class spitting, doing
exactly.
spitballs
That's
through
misunderstood and just needs to go play rugby.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right? Yeah. What's next for you, Jen?
Yeah. So I giving my daughter the best high school years ever. She wants to play sports in college like her brother. And my goal is to buy 2 homes. I want one in Hawaii, one in Bend. Like I said this morning, I just went and challenged for a permit on the local river section here. I have a lot to do with that. I'm going to finish up my pilot's license. That helicopter dream never died. I dabbled through the years as a mom and just could never break away the time to properly put into it, let alone travel. So once I've launched my daughter, I want to be one of those. They're going to be like, where's mom? I don't know. She's in Iceland guiding, that's who I am. So I haven't even explored to the extent I want to. I've put my kids first, which I love. Absolute pleasure, no regrets. after that, I'm also working on a retreat with some friends of mine. We're going to do these adventure retreats where we bring people in and expose them to different outdoor activities in Hawaii as well as in Bend. See if we can't help heal. Our first initial launch is going to be this spring, and we are dialing it down to women. We want to help fellow women, empower them, broaden their lives, give them a breakthrough in some way. But there's a lot of women just bearing the load. There's a lot of women out there exhausted, underappreciated, that are the backbones of society. They're the ones holding families together, and they need a break. And so we see that, and we want to honor that. So we're going to do that in the ways that we know how. For me, it's nature and getting them out in the outdoors and water sports, and then wherever that evolves from there. But it's endless for me, honestly. I feel like once I get a goal accomplished, I'll just make another one. So,
well, I'm going to repeat. Yeah. I'm going to repeat. Give me a few minutes here because I want to repeat something I've already said once, and I just want the Bamboo Pack member out there listening to this right now. I want you to picture Jen's life and her journey, and I want you to put yours next to it, parallel to it. I don't want you to compare the two. I want you to put it next to it. Maybe what Jen experienced as a young person and through her younger years, maybe that's something similar to you. Maybe it's something you're experiencing now. It could be, it doesn't have to necessarily be some of the exact same things. Maybe you're experiencing health issues or financial issues or marital issues or mental health issues, or they might, a myriad of things. But I want you to picture this. I want you to think what Jen has gone through. Okay, she was born in a traditional family, a Mormon family. She escaped that religion anyway, and found her soul and spirit and spirituality and Christianity. But listen to this: she was raped as a 17-year-old person, a young girl, raped. She attempted suicide at 18 years old. She had developed an eating disorder just because she couldn't eat. Every time she ate, she would get sick. She experienced domestic violence. She fought this battle and had to armor her son. I mean, the word she said is she weaponized his mind. She had to go through that and get this kid to be a young warrior to fight this monster that was his biological father. She fought depression. Her mother said to her, "One of us has to die," at one point in her life. All this stuff that she's gone through at different periods of her life. I want you to think what you're going through right now and what struggles you're facing. And I know many of you out there listening right now, you come to this podcast because you do firmly believe that you need help. You're trying to find a way to some problem you're facing, some challenge. You're facing this brick wall that you think may be insurmountable. That's bullshit. It's not. Because when I look at Jen now and I said, "How is your life now?" Her first statement, "We are so blessed." She said, "You wouldn't even know. We're so blessed. We're making our own mark. We don't stay in the pain and hurt. We use them as stepping stones. We are not victims. We are warriors. It's a mindset. Be a fighter." And now she's looking at her next step is 2 homes, one in Bend, Oregon. And it's funny because I have a guest tomorrow who's from Boring, Oregon. So I don't know how far that is from Bend. I spent a lot of time in Bend, Oregon. And she's going to have a house in Hawaii. She's getting a license, helicopter's license. She's getting fighting to get this license on the river, this permit for the river, so she can launch this company of hers, this business of hers. And then she is putting together adventure retreats that bringing women, introducing the nature and the rivers and the waters and the forest and the mountains to empower women who are bearing the load. And the last thing she said about that, she says, "It's endless for me." She went from this young girl raped at 17 to now saying, "Life, it's endless for me. My potential, my possibility are endless for me." Every one of you who are facing anything, or will, maybe it's not happening today, but it will happen. You will face your brick walls. Just say to yourself, "It's endless for me." Remember Jen's story. Bring it back. Go back and listen to this podcast and listen to her story. If Jen can do it, her son can do it, her daughter can do it after losing her best friend at age 11 to suicide. You can do it. And I think that's the best message. When I talked to Jen before the podcast, she said, "I really just want to live a message of hope." And if she did nothing today, she definitely did that. She did a lot of things, but she definitely did that. But I think the bigger lesson is do life on your own damn terms. Everybody puts us in these I know people think I'm weird. I know they do. And that's okay. I'm just weird because I'm different. But, and I'm not as iconoclastic as Jen is. I hope to get there someday. And that's been my journey for my entire life. But we're all weird. We're all different than the next person, which is really the definition of weird. And embrace your weirdness, man, and make your life a safe haven for the other weird people in your world, because they change it. They change your world for the better. Jen, was there any question that I didn't ask that you wish I would have, or any like final statement or mantra or message you want to leave to the Bamboo Pack member listening?
No questions. I think we covered a lot. If I had any message for people listening to, I would just say you can do it. You literally can do anything you want to. Literally see it, be it, breathe it, dream it. Don't ever settle. It's never too late to go get your dreams, like whatever has been on your heart. And my message would be what I raise my kids, telling them what I've done myself, is that calling inside of you, whatever brings you the greatest joy, what you live for. It doesn't matter what it is. That is your purpose. And know that you have everything inside of you to make that a reality. Don't ever take no. Like literally go follow that, because we need you. We need everybody to live in their fullest potential and their gifts and talents, because they all complement each other, right? It's not like I'm some super strong woman, Brian. Honestly, I would never be where I am without the help of many people around me, good people. Nobody gets to the top or successful alone, right? And of course, that strong belief in God and that faith that we really lean on for supernatural peace in times where we should be freaking out. I read the word every morning. I pray every morning, going on about 13 months now. And it has changed my life profoundly. The morning practice has changed my life a lot. So yeah, I would just say the message of hope. If I could give anyone hope, absolutely, you can do it. Don't believe otherwise.
Well, you are like the Phoenix Rising. I tell you that. Well, I can't. I'd like to talk to you a few minutes after we're done here recording. But I just want to say thank you so much. This was an amazing story. After we talked yesterday, I knew it was going to be, and I learned even a lot more today in the hour we spent together than I did yesterday. Thank you for being such an inspiring, sending such an inspiring message and being such an inspiring guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast, Jen.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. I'm going to sign off and we can talk for a few minutes after. So ladies and gentlemen, that was the Carnage Queen to the Norwegian warrior, the unconquerable, iconoclastic Jen Kjellesvik. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to sign off for now. We'll be back in the next few days. You'll hear us. This will probably be released as a special episode, so you'll hear from us very soon. I want to ask you to hit that like button, smash that like button. Please rate, review, and subscribe. And by all means, share this particular podcast with 3 people you love, because I know you know 3 people, if not yourself, who is going through a traumatic event right now, who feels like they're beaten, burned, bruised, and can't get up. Let them know they are a warrior, that they have the warrior spirit inside. Give them the hope, the message of hope that Jen just shared with us all. In the meantime, please, everyone, get out there and sculpt your life. Get out there, sculpt away all the unnecessary, keep the necessary, build it stronger, and get closer and closer each day to living your true peak identity. I appreciate you all.